Somebody asked me a few weeks ago if I would be willing to make a video on jobs that don't interfere with personal creativity. I thought that this was fascinating because this is something that I thought a lot about when I was in college and graduating college and thinking about getting my first job or my first full-time after college job. So today we are going to be talking about jobs that don't require writing or creativity, at least not as the primary part of the job. If you go on to enjoy this video, I would really appreciate it if you could give it a big thumbs up because that really supports my channel by telling the YouTube algorithm that you liked my video and somebody else might too. And so without further ado, let's get into this video talking about some of the job options for people who are creative but don't want creativity to be a part of their jobs. A little bit of history about me. I went to school in Dallas, Texas to get a degree in English with a specialization in creative writing, and therefore most of my jobs in college were part-time jobs in marketing. When I was getting my English degree, I was just assuming that I was going to go into publishing or editing or something. I thought that being a publishing agent would be really cool. However, there were a couple hesitancies for me around that ended up winning out. And the first one is that you have to work as an intern or under an agent for about 10 years before you can even start to become an agent. And in talking to several people that I know that were working for publishing houses at the time, they were reading all day. They were being overworked because they would take manuscripts home with them to read. They would be reading in the morning before work. And so pretty much all of their time was being taken up by reading, and they weren't being compensated well either. And so the fact that it was pretty well known that the timeline to be an agent or work for a publishing house was 10 years, and then even after 10 years, not making more than like $50,000 a year, and the idea of having all of my creativity being spent on someone else's creative projects and dreams instead of my own, ultimately led me away from that path. I just kind of assumed that marketing was where I should be because I was interested in writing. I knew that I was good at writing. I thought I would be good at marketing. Turns out I don't really like marketing for people and companies that I don't believe in. And I think that's huge. And a couple of the jobs that I held were really draining on my creativity because I was giving my job all of my creative energy when in reality, what I wanted to prioritize was my writing and my own creative projects, but that was really hard to do when I was going to an office for 8 or 9 hours a day and then coming home and not wanting to write because I had already given all of my creative energy away for the day, and I knew that I was going to give it all away the next day too. The last marketing job I had was actually probably just the icing on the cake of a bad situation because during the pandemic I had moved from Dallas over to Fort Worth because I needed to get out of the city. I needed a city with slightly more nature, but I also still wanted to be around people that I knew because I knew that I couldn't just move across the country to Utah during the pandemic because I wasn't going to be able to meet new people. And that was really important, was still having a community while the world was just falling apart. So during the pandemic, I was able to secure a job between Dallas and Fort Worth. Those two cities are only like 45 minutes apart from one another. The job that I ended up getting was in the middle of them, and it was exactly a 23-minute drive from my apartment to my job. It was in the middle of nowhere, Texas, or at least it felt like it, even though it was between two major cities. It was complete suburbia. It was not where I wanted to be, and it was so draining because I was marketing for something that I didn't believe in. And that on top of not being in the city that I wanted to be in, having to drive through super flat Texas to get to my job, 23 minutes there and back every day, having to be in the office by like 8-ish a.m. And then I would get a strict 1 hour for lunch, and then I was free to leave at 5. And it was a very 8 to 5 job, very structured. I couldn't leave even if I was done with my work, which felt insane. And during this time, I was really just looking for something that was going to feel more satisfying to me because I'm a very projects-oriented person and I don't like just sitting at a desk and working all day and doing a lot of busy work just to look busy for when my boss walks by. So I started thinking and I started talking to my therapist about what I wanted to do because I was in not a good mental space. I did not want to be working that job. I did not want to be in that city, all kinds of things. So I started thinking about jobs that I might want. And my brain kept going back to marketing because I was like, well, this is what I'm good at. I'm a writer, like I can market things, like it's not that hard. But then I would have to remind myself that I was sitting in an office all day, marketing for a company I didn't want to be marketing for, and using up all of my creative energy so that I didn't have enough creative energy at the end of the day to go home and write and work on my own projects. So that all being said, that brings me to the job that I am currently in, which was an absolute godsend when I got it. I am currently a flight coordinator for a private airline, and it has opened my eyes to not hold holding a creative job as a creative person. There's also the icing on the cake that the job is remote and it allowed me to move out to Utah, which is where I want to be. And because it's remote, I can work on my projects, and then when I'm done with my projects that I'm working on for work, I'm done working. And I don't have to sit in an office until 5 p.m. every day just pretending that I'm busy. So when I got this question, I knew I was going to make a video about it because I wanted to be able to talk about at least some ideas to get your brain rolling with jobs for creative people that don't actually involve creativity. So now that I've rambled on for far too long about my personal story around this topic, let's get into discussing some job ideas for creative people that have nothing to do with creativity. When I started thinking about this video topic, most of the jobs that came to my brain were relatively task-oriented, relatively easy in, easy out, you don't bring the office home with you kind of a thing, that don't use a ton of creative problem solving or are not really creative overall. And again, some people love creative jobs and I'm so happy for them. However, for me and the person that asked me this question at the very least, that's not the case. We wanted to be able to spend our own creative energy on our own creative projects. One of the first categories of jobs that came to my mind are service jobs. That means retail, working in a restaurant, working in a hotel, that gist. These are all jobs where you go in, you work for a set amount of hours, you get paid, you leave. And it's great. Everything stays at work. You don't bring any of it home with you. Something that I've heard of several creatives doing, including Brandon Sanderson when he was first starting out and was working a job before he became a full-time author, was working the graveyard shift at a hotel because then he could write while he was working, because the graveyard shift is when the least amount of people are coming in. So he would go to work, man the front desk, and just be able to write as long as people weren't coming up to him. And then whenever people would, he would stop what he was doing, help the customer, and then go back to writing. And so he was actually able to use a job like that to help his creative pursuits. However, if you want to work in retail or in a restaurant or in a bar or something along those lines, those are all relatively easy to get, at least in the amount of schooling or whatever you need before it. Another fun thing with a service job is the stories that you would get just in working with people, because sometimes people are crazy. And you know what crazy people help inform? Characters. So that is great. It could be a great source of ideas and creativity just being around crazy and stupid people. And it could also be inspiring if you meet somebody amazing. Something I recommend when looking for a job is figuring what you want out of the job itself. And I don't necessarily mean what the job is, I mean how the job is laid out. Is it going to be an 8 to 5 or a 9 to 5? And are you going to have to look busy? Is it task oriented? Is it remote? Is it a 4-day work week? Is it evenings? Is it during the day? Is it opening shift? Is it closing shift? Is it remote? Is it in an office? Is it outside? What do you actually want from a job, and how much of your time are you willing to give to a job? The job that I currently have is an on-call remote job. So basically I get paid to be on call for 5 days straight, and that is 24 hours a day for 5 days straight. Sometimes that's great and sometimes it's not so great. But the two huge benefits of this job is that it's remote, and therefore I got to move out to Utah because of it, and because my work is sporadic, because I'm on call and don't have designated hours outside of my meetings. As long as something urgent doesn't pop up, I have time within my day to write and be creative, which is incredible. I'm actually filming this video right now during the workday because I didn't have anything pop up for work, which is crazy that stuff like this exists. It's so cool because I was raised very much with the mentality of, oh, you have to have a traditional 9 to 5 job in order to be successful. That's the only path. That's the only way you can go, which is so not true in today's day and age. So if you are looking for something where you can write during the day, I would suggest looking for a task-oriented or on-call remote job where you are not being paid to work 8 hours a day and 40 hours a week. And in doing this and trying to figure out what you want from your job, you can also look at how important work-life balance is for you and what that means for you, because something that I don't think a lot of people take into consideration is the commute to a job. Because when I was working my job in Texas, I was driving 23 minutes both ways, which was adding like 45 more minutes on top of my already 9-hour day. So the fact that I was giving 9 hours and 45 minutes of my every single day to this job that I did not like was insane to me. And yes, having an on-call job that's sporadic in its hours does have its own set of issues, like not having set hours, which is actually just as big of a con as it is a pro, although I think it's a little bit more of a pro. But sometimes I will get a phone call at 3 a.m. and I have to get up and do something for work. And on those days, it's not ideal. But on the days where that doesn't happen, it's amazing. And I love how I get to write during the day because of it. Another question you might be able to ask yourself is, where do you want it to be? When looking looking for remote jobs, now on most job platforms, you are able to filter the job by whether or not they're remote or remote flexible or partially remote or whatever, which is an amazing advancement, I think. And I think that that's really important to keep in mind and be aware that that filter exists. Also, with a 4-day work week, there are specific job platforms that only post 4-day work week jobs so that every week you can get a 3-day weekend. And companies that are starting to roll this out, and the companies in Europe that have been trying this for the past several years, are noticing that their employees are getting just as much done as a standard 40-hour work week. And it's because so many people have filler in their days just to look busy. And so it's kind of where Parkinson's law comes into play, in that the amount of what you have to do fills the amount of time that you have to do it. So if you have a 9-hour day and you have 2 tasks, it's going to take you the whole 9 hours to do those 2 tasks. But if you are working 4 days a week and not 5, suddenly you can get those tasks done much quicker because you're not adding as much filler into your day. So if you want long weekends where you can focus on your family or on a creative project or building your own business or whatever it is, there are specific job platforms out there for you. And if you don't even want to be inside at all when you're working, and if you want more of a labor-oriented job, there are outdoor jobs, there are jobs at national parks. There is a whole website called Occupation Wild, and all of their job listings are typically seasonal outdoor jobs, which is so cool. And I have considered trying it, but I also like where I live, and so I haven't done it yet. If you want to be able to travel and move around, there are things to consider like house sitting, pet sitting. You can get a job woofing, which stands for Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. If you just want to have your hands in the dirt, you could walk animals, you could become a personal trainer or a group fitness class trainer. If you want to travel, you can become a pilot or a flight attendant. Especially if you want to become a private flight attendant, it actually seems like it's not that difficult, because when I was looking at my current job, something that was being asked within my company was whether or not I needed to be trained as a flight attendant. And apparently the flight attendant training that they send their flight attendants to is only a week long. And yes, they prefer if you have a little bit of prior experience, but overall, it's not like there's that much barrier to entry, at least when it comes to a time investment. But in working for a private airline, I have learned that several of our flight attendants that are currently flying with us are in school, and so they'll go and check on our clients occasionally, but then they'll just be studying in the back of the plane in the galley for like 15 or 20 minutes before they go check on the clients again and bring them around food or drinks or whatever. So there's time and there's breaks within the day, and being a private flight attendant or being a flight attendant in general, you are getting to fly places and experience the world. Sometimes the layovers are not great, and sometimes you don't have time to go out and do anything because you only have a certain amount of time before you're flying again, but it's something to consider if traveling is important to you, that national park jobs and being a flight attendant are all viable options. I know that I've already mentioned the service industry and woofing and working outside, but other things that might be great is looking for a labor job. And this could be construction, dog or house sitting, TaskRabbit, snow shoveling, mowing, or other yard work, and just being outside and getting your hands dirty, or having it be labor oriented and not necessarily mind oriented. But if that's not really your cup of tea, I have other suggestions. You could do something like data entry or data analysis, which yes, typically require a certification or a degree, but most seem to just require a certification. And these are relatively simple tasks where again, it's easy in, easy out, relatively mindless. You could be a virtual assistant or an executive assistant for somebody, where again, you have the structured hours within your day, but it's still task oriented. If talking to people doesn't drain you, you could be a customer service agent and just answer people's questions. You could do remote English teaching. I know that there are a bunch of websites that do that help teach kids in other countries English, and the majority of those are remote, even though there are in-person options if you want to move to another country. There are also options like transcription if you don't mind typing. There are options like temp work if you want things to be changing occasionally and want to be switching up your somewhat boring job. If it's not creative, I kind of consider it to be boring, but boring doesn't have to be a bad thing. I want that to be very, very clear. You could go into caregiving, you could be a secretary or a concierge, you could go into property management, and I know I've already said this, but you can work in a restaurant or a bar or work from a rideshare app and get lots of stories and character ideas along the way, as well as try to get hours around when you write the best or are the most creative. And so there's a whole bunch of possibilities out there. There are also jobs with a higher barrier to entry, like being an accountant or being in finance. And yes, sometimes those do take creative problem solving, but mostly it feels like those are pretty cut and dry and relatively straightforward in being about the numbers and not about the creativity. I know that this was by no means an exhaustive list, but hopefully you were able to get some ideas out of this. This is also a friendly reminder that having a creative job is not a bad thing if that's what you want. That is incredible if you have one. This was just for the people that don't don't necessarily want their creativity to be taken up by their jobs. So with that, if you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you could give it a big thumbs up, because that tells the YouTube algorithm that you liked my video and that someone else might too. If you enjoyed this video and want to see something similar or want to hear me elaborate about something a little bit more, feel free to leave a comment down below and I'll make sure that I get back to you or that I make a video about it, because again, the idea for this YouTube video came off of one comment. Make sure you subscribe if you want to see more videos from me, because I am currently posting videos twice a week, every Monday and Thursday, sometimes Tuesday and Friday, depending on the week. But with that, thank you guys so much for watching. I'm Sara Lubratt and I will see you in the next video. Bye.